Hello, everybody. We're letting everybody in on Zoom now. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
John Stallman is texting. Um, uh, Everyone wanted to make sure that John and Gloria were safe.
Yeah, heard
He
about
Where
was
are they?
he was in Africa, but he's in Rwanda. He actually just texted me. He just had lunch at the Hotel Rwanda, which is of course famous from the movie about the Rwandan Civil War, the Rwandan genocide, if you will.
not
But
not
yeah,
my bathtub.
yeah. Anyway, so he was, yeah, he's safe, and they're not in Kenya, but yeah, it was that when those kind of things happen, you're always like, we actually years ago, it's kind of like one of those things where you're like, well, people who have the kind of discretionary income to go on fabulous trips and things like that, you know. So Tracy had a boss years ago who was killed in a helicopter accident in Australia when they were on some adventure. So it does happen to people. I mean, that I mean, there somebody knew these people who passed, but yeah, I mean, you wonder about the kind of, it's not necessarily just, thrill seeking, but just adventures, that people go on. And sometimes, sometimes they're scary. I mean, we've had congregants who've died, who've drowned, river rafting and, on
Oh
other,
my God, I remember that one.
yeah, that was really sad time. And we had a young boy who died at Castaic Lake, on a jet ski. So yeah, it doesn't, you should never be scared of going out on adventures and things, but like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, people are just going out and having a good time, trying to enjoy life and enjoy, adventures and stuff like that. But, whatever, you never know, unfortunately. But I think, that's one of the things we take for granted too, is like we go, oh, we have really good air safety here and things like that. But I remember a few years ago there was a horrible small plane crash in Las Vegas that killed an Orthodox Jewish family that like everybody knew. They were from back east, and like, people were like devastated because so many people knew them. And again, just thinking they're out having a good time. Anyways, folks, on a happier note, I guess, well, maybe not a happier note, we'll still let people in. I know there's still people traveling, and um, we had a few people out yesterday from Tuesday class, but we're already streaming up on Facebook. And last week we talked about Jewish film and then got into the television towards the end, telling the story of Jews in media, but specifically film and television media, because we talked about Jews in music. But I was really thinking about how to tell this story and how to tell the story in a way that focuses on things that aren't oftentimes talked about. So that was kind of what we talked about last week, introducing this idea that over last week and then today, for those who are watching this maybe on Facebook who didn't see last week, go back. It's up. It's posted up on our YouTube channel, and we looked at Jews starting Hollywood, basically in the film industry, but how the Jewish film industry or Jewish owned film industry didn't actually tell Jewish stories and was kind of reflective of a generation of Jews, many of them immigrants, who didn't really feel comfortable telling Jewish stories or portraying Jews on film. And when they did portray Jews on film, they oftentimes changed their names or kind of de-accentuated their Judaism. We didn't talk about all the Jewish actors who had their names changed, which, by the way, still happens. I mean, there's still Jewish actors, who it's not. It wasn't just from the 30s and 40s where Jewish actors had their names changed. I mean, we've talked about when we were in Hungary just a few weeks or months, whatever, a month and a half ago. We talked about people who you know who were very popular in the United States under their aliases. You know, uh, we talked about Tony Curtis being originally Bernard Schwartz. Uh, people like I mean, there's so many that we talked about people who, and again, but what I was going to say is that that continues into our own days when people would be encouraged to kind of anglicize their names so that they could be more accepted by uh by the mainstream. But yeah, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about Jews in Hollywood and specifically in television, because that's really where we see this transition. I would argue that we go from Jews being afraid to tell Jewish stories and to be acknowledging their Judaism on screen to very Jewish programming today. We're going to get to that story today. We're gonna wind up there. So I don't know. We don't have a lot of people on today, so I don't know if everybody is traveling or people are just exhausted today. I have to say I'm kind of exhausted today too. I don't know if it's the heat, but I have drinks here. I have a little Coke Zero and a little water that keep me hydrated. But let's dig in. And today I also want to like, again, part of what I want to do is take people through stories that aren't that well known. So I want to talk a little bit today when we talk about television to talk about the fact that right now we're living in an age where Israeli television, not so much film, but there have been Israeli films that have been acknowledged, but Israeli television in particular has become very popular in the United States. We're kind of going through right now a golden age of Israeli television, both in programs that are aired with subtitles or with dubbing, and also shows that have been adapted for American audiences, but are essentially, made their break, were created in Israel. So we're going to get to that today too. So, um, kind of where we left off was talking about how television, to some extent, was the media form, not so much film, but was really the media form that introduced people to Jewish communities and Jewish individuals, and I would argue Jewish families. And the foremost example of it I mentioned last week was really the Goldbergs, which was in some ways a groundbreaking show, in a lot of ways a groundbreaking show, not just for the Jewish community, but as I mentioned, um, for um, for us to recognize that Gertrude Berg, who was born in 1899, like kind of like the first waves of earlier waves of Jews who came from, in her case, um, her family, had come from Russia, but these were immigrants and first generation Americans. She's a woman who produced a radio program and then a television program, really groundbreaking for not just for Jews but for women. So, um, but then I mentioned that shows like Sid Caesar's Show of Shows really brought Jewish comedy and then Jewish timing, a Jewish sensibility uh, for the way we look at the world to American homes. And all of the people who worked on that show, who ended up working in television or working in film, people like Mel Brooks, people like Carl Reiner, people who had a big effect on us and on our country, came out of that um, environment. So it was television to some extent that did that, and then allowed, even though Mel Brooks didn't really work in the television, um, in that medium. The fact is that he came out of that medium, and he ended up, again, making, as we talked about last week, adding a lot of Yiddishkeit to his films. So today, though, I want to really kind of focus on television and the growth of television, because I think it's more recognizable, and more, it's a little bit easier to kind of track it, than it is in film, for a lot of reasons. But let's just look at this quickly. If you can see the thing I just shared, you have the Goldbergs. That was a very early program. Was on, started in '49 and ran for, I think, well, it went off for, a couple of years, but then let me just see how many years it actually ran for. It ran for, um, oh, so of course, on radio it was on for several years, on radio. Started in actually 1929, with a show called The Rise of the Goldbergs, and then went into, slightly different format in 1931, but was basically on for almost 20 years before it moved to television. So it ran on television from 1949 until 1956. Um, and so it was, there was a little bit of breaks in the 52-53 season, but basically, it was on the air in some, by the way, in some form, if you think about it, for almost 30 years, from 1929 to 1956. But it opened up this idea that Jewish families were like every other family. And in the 70s, we had programs that started breaking down, a lot of stereotypes, and the most pronounced ones were shows that were sitcoms that dominated, the 60s and 70s, which included shows like All in the Family and Rhoda. And again, there were a lot of shows in the middle of that, I Love Lucy, and The Honeymooners, and a lot of other shows that established the genre. But when you get into the 70s, and again, as we mentioned last week, uh, when you have Rhoda, again, interestingly played by Valerie Harper, who was not Jewish. Everyone thought she was Jewish because she had nailed the Jewish mannerisms, and had been on so many Jewish comedy albums, and had done so many Jewish characters. People just assumed she was Jewish. But that really, again, was part of uh, this whole wave of shows like Maude, and All in the Family, and The Jeffersons, which by the way, obviously created by Norman Lear, one of the more
Who's
important
Jewish?
Jewish, television, producers, who just recently passed away, by the way, at over 100 years old. He lived a very long and active life, and was still going out. And I mean, I saw him a couple years ago at like 100. He had amazing energy, and really did help, again, make Americans a little bit more sensitive to diversity, and made fun and poked fun of the stereotypical, racist anti-Semite through All in the Family. So, I, I I didn't show clips last week because we had such a bad time with the songs when we were showing them. So I didn't run clips, but they're that even though the characters on All in the Family were not Jewish, there were several episodes that um that were uh that were about Jewish characters, and kind of platform this kind of breaking down the stereotypes and exposing the absurdity of anti-Semitism. But of course, one of those characters was Maud, right? And so Maud started as a spinoff of All in the Family, and this idea of of B. Arthur playing a character with all these with all these Jewish mannerisms and all these kind of you know dealing with these stereotypes that we would have of a liberal Jewish kind of feminist kind of situation. um it was interesting because when and B. Arthur obviously had always played Jewish characters. You know, it was you know, like, is it going to be Jewish or not? And um Maud as a character was not Jewish. Like, they never said she was Jewish. Like, that was not Norman Lear purposely did that so that the liberalism and the progressive nature of like her what she would do would not be diminished because people would say, well, she's Jewish. So, but the character was so obviously Jewish. And what I find interesting about this kind of show was that this also kind of is what um sitcoms, again, many of them written by Jews, produced by Jews, this continues all the way through Seinfeld. And Seinfeld is probably the best example. You can see Seinfeld came out in 1989, which, by the way, going back now, thinking about the fact that that's almost 40 years ago, Seinfeld hit that this show was very Jewish, and Seinfeld was Jewish. They never said he wasn't Jewish, but they didn't really play up on his Judaism, right? And with George, it was the character, and I mentioned this last week. That was the Larry David. That was Larry David's persona. Larry David didn't want to act, so he had Jason Alexander play him. But and Larry David's only in the show as George Steinbrenner and a few other characters where you only see him from the back. He didn't want to be on. He didn't want to be on film. He wanted to be on tape, right? He didn't want to be the guy. But it's so Jewish. But George is half Jewish on the show, and of course that's part of the underlying um kind of joke there with him, with Festivus and with his father and mother being, they sometimes talk about them being different religions. But of course, Larry David is not half Jewish. And as we know from his show, and we get to the modern times, um, it's not really modern times either, because Curb Your Enthusiasm came out 25 years ago, 26 years ago. But uh the next incarnation of this was but yeah, it was on until recently. um it becomes much more Jewish, and that, almost in a nutshell, the difference between Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm is almost, again, what we see different from 1990s to the 2000s to our present era. If you look at how Jewish the show is compared to Seinfeld, which was the progenitor, if you will, of it, because again, part of what Curb Your Enthusiasm plays on is Larry David's creation of that show, the success that he got from that show, his relationship with Seinfeld, because Seinfeld is in Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it's part of it is, you know, Larry, to something, he never really talks about the show not being that Seinfeld wasn't Jewish, but it's almost as if he's saying, we're taking it all out. We're putting it all out there. We're never going to hide the discussion about Jewish issues in this show. So, on Curb, I'm talking about. But in the meantime, again, you can see another show came not long after Seinfeld, was The Nanny, which was interesting because here we have a very Jewish character that's actually playing on Jewish stereotypes of Fran Drescher, playing a overly, if you will, stereotypical Long Island Jew, who ends up being, of course, in every episode is the somehow saves the day, and in a
You know,
way,
that was Alan's cousin's show.
I didn't know that.
Robert Sternin is his cousin. And Prudence Frazier is Robert's wife. She's
Wow.
not Jewish, actually, but of course Robert Sternin is. Yeah, they did The
Well,
Nanny.
well, the show was obviously very successful, and I think, in some ways, there were certain elements that were kind of like harken back to um, harken back to the kind of Rhoda characters, where you kind of accentuate is kind of like this East Coast kind of accent, but in reality, you know, the show becomes it's all centered really around her, and the humor is again the fact that because she's a real person in a way that she makes the Gentile characters tries to humanize them again, and so it's an interesting it's an interesting um way of working with her. And again, whether or not that's like all she can do, I don't know, but she did great doing a character like that. I mean, she was, she and again, I mean, she ended up um becoming uh very involved in SAG-AFTRA, and she she was she when she finally became president, it was during the strike, and it ended up, I think, um, taking a lot out of her. And of course, she also was as a cancer survivor. But
Mhm.
it's an interesting to me, an interesting transitional character in having Jews, kind of just saying, hey, this is a Jewish character. We're embracing the parts of this that you might find like maybe we were supposed to laugh at it, but we know that she's a hero. And you know, anyways, she's also in the last few years, she's also raised money for Jewish causes and for Israel, and she's been pretty outspoken about her Jewish identity too. But I really look at it as kind of a breakthrough show. Look, I didn't know about your family's involvement with that, but
Not
that's
only that, but because when he went on to Cheers, um, they used the name Sternin for
yeah,
the character Lilith
for Lilith,
Sternin
yeah,
because
for
their
Fraser's
friends did
ex-wife.
Cheers and they did it as a joke. And her name was Fraser and his name was Sternin, and so they swapped it man woman. So you had Fraser Crane and Lilith Sternin.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you told me that there actually was a connection to why.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
I don't
Lilith,
know that I don't think in Cheers, I don't remember Lilith Sternin
she's Jewish,
seeming Jewish
100%, 100%, 100,
in the show
100%,
itself.
100%. Yep.
Okay.
No, 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 no. I will. No, I remember a couple of the episodes they talked about it because I think they actually had a child together, Lilith and Frasier. So they talked about it. And actually, here, this is for those who don't remember Lilith Sternin. That's Lilith, right? The
Yeah.
uptight, also a therapist, and again played by BB Newworth. And what does it say right here? Jewish.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I don't remember her
No, no, no.
character.
That's not BB Newworth. BB Newworth is Jewish too, but this is the character.
Oh,
This is the
okay. I didn't realize
Wikipedia
that.
for
Okay,
this is
gotcha.
the Lilith character. So
Hmm.
she talks about yeah, they talk about her being Jewish. Again, she's not necessarily the most lovable character, but but there's definitely
She was such an interesting character. I love that.
yeah.
Whoever invented that, that was awesome.
No, she was really, and I think BB Newworth did a great job. So
Oh,
yeah, I
she embodied it. She did really
yeah.
good.
So I guess it says that her dad is Jewish. I thought her mother was Jewish too. Maybe I don't know, but
I'm
let
not sure.
me just see. Let me just see if it says something about her. But Yeah, she's Jewish American atheist, but yeah, she's Jewish, and she's very talented too. I mean, I don't know if you saw her in
She's-
Chicago, but she's
Yes, I
an
did. Yeah.
amazing dancer and just like super, super, super talented. So yeah, so and by the way, that's another interesting thing is that we have characters like Lilith, whose Judaism isn't front and center, but is part of the characters, that we that we know and come to love. But we do have to say that again, it's weird to think about this. Not long after these shows were on in the 90s, we get to Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now, we could do a, I wouldn't mind doing it. We could do Jewish journeys just on Curb Your Enthusiasm. There's actually, I remember a rabbi that I'm friends with in Arizona did a whole adult education class series around Curb Your Enthusiasm because there's so much Jewish material in it. It really starts at the beginning from the very first seasons, but there is an entire season. I think it was season 11, which was almost every episode was Jewish. So the show almost plays off the fact that the original Seinfeld show was all considered a Jewish show where they didn't talk about anything Jewish to a show where they do it all the time. And of course, it is because it's cringe comedy. It makes some of the discussions about Judaism and Jewish issues very difficult to watch. But, I would argue it is, and it's not that it's done in love because in some cases it's not. But I really do think that it was an important show. It's been an important show for discussion of Jewish issues. And again, even when they're presented, and one can make the argument because the person presenting it is so unlikable that when he does things that we cringe at, we're not meant to say, well, that's great. We really like that. But because we can laugh at it, because we can acknowledge it. I've often said I don't know how people who are not Jewish can watch this show.
That's what I was
And,
going to ask you. Do you think
and
it's anti-Christian? I
I
mean,
don't
there was the manger scene, and when they took whatever
the
he
Christ
needed
the
to
Christ
tap up his
the,
mezuzah, he
the
needed
Christ
wood.
nail the Christ nail
Oh
mezuzah.
gosh.
Yes, I just watched that again. Look, I can tell you this. I so my point that I've had many discussions with people who love Curb or don't love Curb, whatever, is how do people who are not Jewish watch it? Like, how do they watch it? Your point is they could be offended by it. I would also say, how do they understand it? How does this even make sense? Like the things that you have to almost have been Jewish for your whole life to understand some of these issues and to look at some of the things that he says and go, yeah, we say that kind of stuff, even if it's even if it's not really, really something that we like to admit that we say. So, so there's that. And then you get to the other issue, which is it perceived as something offensive?
Right.
Now, I will tell you, I have talked to people. One of the one of the interesting discussions we had about Curb is my future son-in-law, the son-in-law to be, the one that Dina is engaged to, Jack. He watched Curb uh, maybe he had watched Curb before, but he watched it with Dina as simultaneous to his conversion to Judaism classes. He's watching Curb and he loves it. I mean, let me first say he loved it. It's not like he didn't like it, but I was really worried because I was like, maybe he should go through the conversion classes first before he watches this. So maybe he'll understand it a little bit better. Maybe he won't be turned off of Judaism. Like I'm thinking after watching this, why would he ever want to be Jewish? Who wants to be like this guy, right? But he loved it. And he said it kind of helped him understand, interestingly, a little bit more about Judaism and about, I would say, the way Jews think, the way Jews process the world around them. And so he was not offended by it, and it wasn't a turnoff for him. He actually he loves Curb so much that we had a discussion yesterday. Somebody this is just a perfect example of not something Jewish in Curb, but there was a discussion about I had told my kids, I guess when my father died, which by the way was his yard site 2 days ago, that I became an orphan, and so they're like, you can't tell people you're an orphan at in your 50s. I said, why? I don't know. I think you can. There's a whole episode. There's a whole discussion and episode with him and Funkhauser when his friend Funkhauser, played by the wonderful Super Dave Osborne, otherwise known as Bob Einstein, and who just recently passed, when his father dies, he tells Larry he's an orphan. He goes, I don't think you can call yourself an orphan at your age. And so they have this whole discussion. And my soon-to-be son-in-law, as we're discussing the orphan, whether you can be an orphan at an older age, he sends that clip because he remembered that episode and referenced that Larry David, you can't be an orphan when you're in your 50s, kind of thing. And so, you know, it's not just the Jewish stuff there, but there's a Jewish, well, let me put it this way. There's a, even in a discussion like that, when he's saying something or talking about something and you're like, why does he have an opinion on it? Why is he talking like that? It's it's the Jewish element of that show. When he's giving people, his take on things, it's a very Jewish thing. So I will
I
tell
can
you,
never skip a vote now because of that one episode where he didn't vote, and the one vote made the difference.
yeah,
Remember that
yeah,
one?
yeah, that was one of the very Jewish seasons. But, by the way, Alex Vindman was in the episode where they go to the Santa Monica City Council, and Alex Vindman just lost. He just
Yeah,
lost.
he did.
This is the Senate in the primary in Florida, and they thought he was going to win, but he didn't. But yeah, he was in an episode. Um, it was a pretty funny episode of Curb, but he did things that were even when they weren't about Judaism, they were still very Jewish. So anyway, so Jack not only watched it, but then he got his parents who were not converting. Uh, he got them to watch the show, and they enjoyed it too. They really enjoyed the show. So I can only tell you that in a weird way, like people who are coming into the family, if you will, or people who are watching somebody come into the family, those would be the people I'd be most worried about. You never know if somebody's an anti-Semite, they're going to just say, well, like all Jews are like Larry David, whatever. You almost can't win with that. So why worry about that? But for people who are, you know, people who are paying attention, who are, that we don't want to maybe come across looking like we're nuts. I don't know. They seem to enjoy it, and I think that they can I think they can separate it. Um and I yeah. So Curb becomes to me like when we talk about television today, that's American television where American television has now, I would make the argument, created television that's so Jewish that I would say you have to be Jewish in order to get it. So, and it's on a major streamer. It's on HBO. Now, somebody pointed out, I think maybe it was Bob, that 4.5 million people watch it versus the tens of millions of people that used to watch Seinfeld or some of the other shows. But the reality is that 4.5 million people watching a television show today is astronomical because there's so many options, and so any show that's got more than 2 or 3 million viewers is a winner. And believe me, they paid Larry a lot of money to come back and keep making those episodes after he took a hiatus. And then of course he got paid a bunch of money to produce and to star in this last series that he did with the Obamas. So he doesn't need the money, right? That's pretty clear. He's still living off of $1 billion, and even when it got halved after his divorce from the Seinfeld money, he is not doing it for the money. And so he created a show that I would argue is the complete antithesis of where we started in the 30s and 40s, where Jews were afraid to be Jewish at all, even when they controlled the media.
And so many of the characters were Jewish, like Susie Essman's character, and
So many
yes.
of the
Yeah.
so many of the characters are Jewish. And look, I mean, they even put our cantor, Kenny Ellis, got to play a rabbi on that show, and at the Funkhauser funeral, Funkhauser's nephew's funeral. So yeah, they I will tell you this. Larry, according to Kenny Ellis, is just the way he is. I mean, maybe not exactly the way he is, but that's not far from him. Kenny said he went. I, I gotta just Kenny. Kenny went up to him at the filming, at the taping that he did, and he went up to him and he talked to him. You know, he tried talking to him about some of the mutual people that they know, and then Kenny gave him his Hanukkah Swings CD, and Larry backed up and said, "No, like I don't want it. Don't give it to me. No, I'm not going to take it." So he just did a complete Larry David. No, I don't take things from people. So, I don't give me anything. I don't want it. And he just, that was the end. That was the end of the conversation. So he said it was a very Larry experience. Trying to give him a CD, and unlike most people who just take it and go, "Thank you very much," walk away and throw it away in the trash. He wouldn't even touch it. So yeah, it was he confirmed, but he said he had a really good conversation with Susie Essman, and some of the other people were maybe took the CD. I don't know, but yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit about another level of what's happened, which is not necessarily that these shows, in some cases, they're very Jewish. They're very, very Jewish. But some of these are not. And that is the golden age of Israeli television, which has really gone back now about 20 years. And let me just explain what happened. And I would say, again, this is partly because Jewish involvement in in television, um, especially in networks like HBO, some of the other streaming services that eventually became kind of the way that we watch TV today. Now live through um, a golden age of Israeli TV. So let me show you this show. This show Bet Tipul came out in 2005, just 20 years ago. Now you don't know Bet Tipul, but you definitely, well, you might not have watched it, but the show that it morphed into when it was picked up by HBO and made into a American show was this one, In Treatment with Gabriel Byrne.
Mm.
And this show did very well on HBO. Betty Poole was focused on a therapist and the patients that he talked with and how it affected him. And the show was literally lifted and then taken to taken to American TV. And that opened a cavalcade of Israeli TV. This next show, um, well, it tells you right here, the original series on which the U.S. show Homeland is based, Hatufim, which is translated as Prisoners of War, which I will say is also available to be watched regularly on JLTV on Thursday nights, was turned into this show, Homeland. 2 seasons of Hatufim in Israel. This show lasted for 2 seasons, focused on Jewish Israeli captive who's returned back, but of course has been compromised by his captors. And of course, that becomes a show which in the United States lasts for 9 seasons. 9 seasons. It's hard to
And how
believe.
Jewish was Mandy Patinkin in that show?
Yes, I would say that there ended up being a little element of making sure that Jews are represented, but the show itself, again, would never have existed if it was not for that. Now, that being said, there were those shows that um, once that opened up the the um, the fact that Israeli TV was good, was high quality, that people started saying, well, wait a second, what else? What else can we get? What else does Israel make that we can get? And so Gideon Raff, who's the producer of shows like of Hatufim, his next show was this Fauda, and Fauda has become a hit in um, the United States as a show focusing on the Dudavim, the Dudavim, the the um, the Israeli intelligence units that go into the West Bank and Gaza to infiltrate and to um, hopefully foil attacks from them. Now, the 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 fact that this shows, I think it's fourth season now. The fact that this might be no, they've done 4 seasons. They're about to do a fifth season. So the fact that these shows are able to um, be successful in the United States with a show that um, was produced and created in Israel led Apple TV to do this with the same studio, with the same channel, Con 11. So some people have seen Tehran,
Mm-hmm.
and this show is literally an Emmy Award winner. I think it's fantastic. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you haven't seen it, watch it, because this is just a captivating show. This is an Israeli show, folks. This is a show that is literally done by Israelis. It's written, directed. It is an Israeli television program. And look who's been in the cast. If you haven't watched it, these are pretty big actors. Glenn Close, you've heard of her, right? You've heard
I
of
saw the show.
you've heard of Hugh Laurie, right? These are big American, and these are stars of television and movies that are now working on an Israeli show. That's an amazing accomplishment for a tiny little country that has a whole lot on its plate right now, but they're still making quality programs. I shouldn't show this in case you haven't watched it yet. I don't want you to know. I don't want any spoilers, but it's really amazing how successful these shows from Israel are. So you got Fauda, you've got Hatufim, also known as Prisoners of War. You've got Tehran, which all focus on espionage and kind of drama around war. But then we also have shows that focus on religion. And I would say we've created another genre of Israeli TV, which is let's look at how different the ultra orthodox are, right? And so what's interesting about this is that when you think about telling Jewish stories, that now we have stories that aren't just going to tell Jewish stories, but they're going to tell ultra orthodox Jewish stories. I ask myself the same question that we have with Curb Your Enthusiasm. Do people really want to see this? Now, this is not my favorite Israeli show, and it's not done by Khan. It's actually done by a different channel. Yes, this is another Israeli network. But this show has been running on Netflix, and I think I think it might not be running, but anymore. I don't think they're doing any more. They're not doing any more of these episodes, but then they created a spin-off called Kugel. So it is actually a uh prequel, if you will. And so some of the same actors are in it, but um yeah, I don't know if it let me just see if it's going to continue. I don't think it is. So received critical acclaim. Well, maybe. I guess maybe it hasn't run its course yet. But yeah, this is another this is another show which focuses um, on ultra Orthodox Jews, what we call Haredi Jews. I mentioned this actually yesterday on the Tuesday class. The word Haredi means to tremble. But yeah, this was yeah, it's an interesting to me. I mean, the fact that people want to see a show about ultra Orthodox Jews is amazing to me.
I watched it. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but uh, okay, not I should say uh not that Jews want to see it.
That
This
anyone else
couldn't this
can see.
couldn't be on if it wasn't being watched by Gentiles.
Hmm.
Couldn't be on Netflix. So yeah, so this shtisel takes place in Yerushalayim and Mea Shearim. The new show Kugel takes place in Antwerp, but follows the family before they come to Israel. So yeah, it's amazing. Um, so you can see here, Amazon was planning to remake it under title MS, being set in New York. So yeah, these are the Israeli shows now that um, are have been breakthroughs because they've been very popular in the United States. And of course, another one of the programs that kind of was dealing with life amongst the the Orthodox was this 2020 miniseries that was on Netflix that some people might have seen called Unorthodox.
Yeah, I saw it.
And it was based on an autobiography of a woman who left the uh, the ultra Orthodox world, and Shira Haas starred in it. And yeah, I saw it. I thought it was okay. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't again my favorite, but I don't think it was bad. By the way, it got a 96 on Rotten Tomatoes, so people
Really?
definitely people definitely liked it. But again, I think part of it was people kind of wanting to kind of look at it, like what how do these ultra Orthodox people live, especially this one was starts out in New York. And so part of it is part of it is like these people live amongst us, but they're so different. And so yeah, I thought that it was yeah, it was an interesting show, but I felt like they were trying to make people kind of like learn about how people are living amongst us, but not following our rules, that kind of thing. I don't know, just kind of the like they're like what you would do if you were doing the Amish, like if you were trying to show a community that lives amongst us, but like they're totally living an alternate universe. Anyways, but we also want to talk a little bit about um, one of the shows that I think people are still trying to figure out I still see discussions about this. I mean, I still hear people. I think I had a discussion about this a day ago. Is the show Nobody Wants This? Um, People have very um, they get very passionate about this show. Um, some people really like it, and then other people really don't like it. I don't think I've seen too many shows that are this Jewish where people are also, that passionate. I mean, I guess people get passionate about Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it doesn't seem like Curb, like people just either ignore it. Like this show, people can't ignore because it's so popular and because it's so mainstream. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who just say, "Oh, I don't find Larry David funny." This almost compels people to have feelings about the show. And of course, the show centers on Adam Brody. His character, Rabbi Noah, is a young rabbi who falls in love with a Gentile woman played by Kristen Bell, Joanne, and the hilarity ensues. There's Noah's mother, who's played by Tova Feldshuh, that's trying to break them up, and there's their siblings, and their siblings in their kind of um their dysfunction, and there's his senior rabbi, who his boss, who is kind of trying to figure out what to do with his protege now that he's dating a Gentile. So it's an interesting take on modern Judaism, and it's a very LA show too. And I think that's one of the things that maybe in our community people people get maybe a little bit more passionate about is is this reflective of our community? Like, is this making our community, is it making it look bad? And is there is there is there an unintentional or intentional statement here about interfaith marriage, which is going to if you have a rabbi that's going to be dating somebody who's not Jewish, how can anybody, not like, who should ever make a comment about somebody who be dating somebody who's not Jewish? I actually hear it more from people who are uncomfortable about the interfaith aspect of it, rather than like it makes Jews look pushy or makes Jews look too parochial or whatever. It's more of, I hear more from people going, I think it's mainstreaming, a problem that we already have, which is interfaith marriage. But yeah, Philip, sorry.
Yeah. What did you think of? I think it was close to the last line of the final episode of season 2, where someone says to her, basically, "You're Jewish, and you don't
You're
even
Jewish
know."
already. Yeah.
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 What do you think of that?
I listen, I liked it, and I liked the show overall. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Adam Brody, or I mean, Kristen Bell. I actually I find her funny, but um, I don't love the acting. I think there's a lot of overacting, and there's certain things I like about it, but I like the overall message. I have to be, like, nobody consulted with me about this show, by the way. I just want to make it clear. Nobody asked me for I was not a consulting rabbi on this show. It also has a 90, or at least the first season had a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. The second season dropped down to 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. But people still overall, gave it, overall, uh, pretty good reviews. The second season, I know for a fact well, I should say nothing's a fact, but at least the intention of it is not going to be making Judaism look bad. Because Erin Foster, who really wrote this story, it's kind of her story a little bit. I mean, a little bit. She did not marry a rabbi, but she did convert to Judaism before she married her husband, who, you know, she made this choice. So she personally made this choice to convert. So my guess is that, like, as she makes this choice, it's going to be a real, it's going to be, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be done with good intention, and actually going to make people feel good who are Jewish and who think that this is an important story to tell, even if, again, it's making some people feel uncomfortable. By the way, Aaron Foster's father is David Foster. You know who David Foster is, right?
No.
The musician.
Yeah, he's only the biggest composer of Hollywood music in our world, right? These are the songs that David Foster, her father, wrote. I will always love you. I have nothing. The prayer after the love is gone. Hard to say I'm sorry. Hard habit to break. I mean, some of these were pop songs, but yeah, he is the dude who wrote the Titanic song. I mean, there's
Wow.
nobody bigger in Hollywood lyrics, if you will. I mean, obviously Hans Zimmer and uh, you know, uh, um, I mean, there's so many. You could say Randy Newman. There's a lot of composers in Hollywood, but for somebody who's written pop songs that have become huge songs, David Foster is the biggest. So this is Aaron's father. So
He's Canadian.
He's
yeah, he is Canadian. He's lived in America for a long time. Over the years, he's worked with like everybody, and of course, you can see he's actually right now married to Catherine McPhee, who's quite a bit younger than him, but he's been married several times. Anyways, here's Aaron Foster. Aaron is 43, not too far apart from Kristen Bell, and you can see that she married um, Simon Tickman, um, who she met at a gym, and you can see she converted in 2019.
he's
So
on his this is his fifth marriage.
yes, I know,
So
I
I
know.
mean I it's good for my business, I
It's
suppose.
good for you. It's great for your business. But yes, I think Catherine McPhee, just not that why do I even do this right now? Kristen Bell's 43. Catherine McPhee is,
42.
yeah. You you get my you get my point. So she's a little younger than his daughter. Anyways, that's not, I don't want to, this is not the time to talk about David Foster. But he is Aaron grew up in a home where there were a lot of Hollywood celebrities, a lot of people in and out of the out of her home that were Jewish. But again, I have to say that when she does this, when she does this next season where I think she's converting. I read a little bit of the story that she's actually in a conversion class. So several of the episodes take place during the conversion class. I think I read that Sarah Silverman is the rabbi of the conversion class.
Oh,
So
that's great.
I think it should be great. But again, we've now come to a place where very Jewish issues are being just, they're spotlighted, and the Kristen Bell, the Kristen Bell having a character that we've come to a place now where, based on what I've heard, again, I'm pretty sure this is the case, but don't get me if I'm wrong on this, that the next series, that the next season that's coming out of Nobody Wants This, is literally going to take place in a conversion to Judaism class. Do you understand? We're talking about Jews who 75, 80 years ago didn't want people to talk about their Judaism because it brought them nothing but discomfort and exclusion and basic covert and overt anti-Semitism. The Goldwins, the Warners, those kind of people who lived with that kind of mentality, that now we're going to have a show that everyone have access to. It's not like on a little channel. People are going to watch a show where the main character is going through conversion to Judaism. Now, what's interesting, and I want to tie it all back, this is the this is the callback now here. I want to take some time before we finish today to talk about something that I think is really interesting about when we talk about Jews in Hollywood, Jews in television and movies, is that we really need to acknowledge something too. I think that's phenomenal, which is, again, Kristen Bell is not converting herself, but her character, the person that she's based on, Aaron Foster, did convert. There are several high profile over the years people who've converted to Judaism who one could say have had an effect on Jews because we knew that these people converted, and whether or not they then made their Judaism a statement of who they were, and some of you already brought up one of them even before we got into this. What we have to acknowledge that maybe that had something to do with Hollywood becoming and the rest and through Hollywood, the rest of the country understanding and accepting Judaism. And let me make this point. So Aaron Foster converted, as you saw, in 2019. So people are still converting to Judaism. I'll come back. I'll get to that. We'll come back to that. Come back to now. But in the 1950s, we saw an amazing amount of people convert to Judaism who are, I would argue, not that you could say they're high profile. There was nobody higher profile. One of the first people who converted even before the 50s, interestingly enough, going back to the Hollywood moguls that we talked about, one of the first people who converted in Hollywood to Judaism, and again, for somebody who comes from a American background, from somebody who, if you will, well, I will say that technically speaking, this woman was Canadian and American, was converted even before the 50s. So I want to give her proper recognition, is Norma Shearer. Now, Norma Shearer was literally one of the biggest actresses of her day. And she married this guy, Irving Thalberg, who we talked about before. Even though Irving Thalberg wasn't the head of a studio, he was one of the most important people in the history of Hollywood. And as you can see from Irving Thalberg, and just remind you real quick who Irving Thalberg was. There he is right there. Irving Thalberg was born in New York, and again, 1899, he
Only
worked
lived to be
with-
37. Wow.
Exactly. I was just going to say. So he died of pneumonia at 37. So, he was literally one of the pioneers of film, and he started very, very young. I mean, here you can see him with his wife Norma Shearer in 1932 with Louis Mayer. And again, one of the reasons why he discovered talent, he worked with these people, but again, here he is with Norma Shearer. He was just a few years older than her, but look at this. He died when he was 37 of pneumonia. And what's amazing is how much he did before he was 37. Like what he would have done, over a career that could have, been another 30 or 40 years. It's unbelievable. So he married Norma Shearer, and she converted when she married him. Now, this was unusual because, again, several of the Hollywood moguls married Gentiles, but they did not convert, these women, for the most part. I know there were some, but this one was very rare because Norma Shearer was also a Hollywood star. She wasn't like, some of the other women who might have been Hollywood ingenue, or they might have worked in the studios and they caught the eye of their boss, etc. That happened several times. But this one won't. This story is a woman who was very successful in her own right and then converted. So it's a kind of a really cool love story, and you can see that again before they were married, she converted. So this was early. I mean, this was 1927. So this is well before the 50s. But you know who I'm going to tell you was really the first, right? Really the first one of the high
Elizabeth Taylor.
profile was who?
Elizabeth Taylor.
No, she actually would not be the first.
Marilyn Monroe.
She would not be she would not be the first. The one that really kicked it all off, if you think about it, I would argue would be because he converted a little bit before.
Sammy Davis Jr.
Esther wins. Sammy converted in 1954. And you can see him here at the wall. He went to Israel several times. My dad brought him to Israel during the Lebanon War in the 80s, and he had a chance to sing and help support the soldiers who were serving in Lebanon back then in the 80s. But you can see he nearly died, and it changed his life.
I don't want to digress for a second talking about young Jews that died, but George Gershon was only like 38.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think was
you
he
imagine
38?
what
I
he-
don't even know if he was that old.
Can you imagine what would have happened if he had lived longer? Just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yep. So 1954 was Sammy Davis Jr.'s conversion. Now, technically speaking, the next conversion on that list is one that you already said, because I would say that these three are the triumvirate. They're the trifecta of conversions, of high profile conversions. Was this one right here, Marilyn Monroe. So she converted in 1956, and remember how old she was when she died. 36.
Yep.
36. But you can see she converted when she married Arthur Miller. Now, she married Arthur Miller, and what was interesting about it was, I'm not sure if the Wikipedia page is going to talk about it, but she converted in 56, and after she converted, Egypt wouldn't show any of her films. I mean, this is the world that we lived in the 50s and 60s. I mean, whatever. It's actually some of that still continued. Even I remember the movie Prince of Egypt wasn't shown in a bunch of Muslim countries because of Steven Spielberg and because Ofra Haza sung on it. But look, so she converted in 56. This was 6 years before she's going to die, right? So she's 30 years old. I want to tell you that I was fascinated with this story. I always was kind of fascinated by Marilyn Monroe, not because she was a beautiful woman or this, but her story to me just embodies the tragedy, the Hollywood tragedy, right? The way Hollywood kind of chews up and spits out people. Now, what was interesting about this is that I was probably in my 20s, and I was fascinated with her conversion. I had read a biography about her that had just come out, and it talked about her conversion, but there was no information. It mentioned the name of the rabbi who oversaw her conversion. So I said to myself, I want to know what was her conversion. First of all, I don't know. I would have been very distracted as a rabbi counseling her for her conversion. I would have probably not been the right person for that. But that's not the point. It's like, what did she do? What did she read? Like, so I called the rabbi in Connecticut, and he had retired several years before. And I got him on the phone and I started talking with him, and I taped it. So somewhere this interview exists, because I was going to use it on my dad didn't even have a network yet at this point. It was just literally a radio show. And I was going to like edit it or do something with it. I never did. But I interviewed the guy, and he wouldn't talk about it at first, the rabbi, and then I finally broke it down. I said something, and everything spilled out, and he told me the whole story. And what was interesting is that, and I did hear this somewhere else, Arthur Miller was not religious. He did not want her to convert. This was not his idea. She converted because she loved his parents.
Hmm.
She loved how warm they were to her, the wonderful just feeling in their home. And so like Arthur Miller couldn't figure it out. He was like, "Yeah, we're not going to be doing Jewish stuff." And she says, "I want to be Jewish. I want to have that kind of marriage like your parents have." So they did. And so she was very close. And again, she never had that kind of upbringing. She had such a dysfunctional and horrendous childhood herself that she thought like maybe she would be able to have that kind of family. So that's why she went through conversion. I asked him what she did, and she read some books, and it doesn't sound like it was a very long and tedious study, but he did, and she did not have a mikvah, but she did, but a lot of Reform rabbis at the time didn't require a mikvah, but she basically, you know, announced her willing or desire to be part of the Jewish people, and they did a ceremony in his office of her becoming part of the Jewish people. According to what I've read, she considered herself Jewish afterwards, even after she broke up with Arthur Miller, which she did not long after that. She had a series of miscarriages. She was not able to have a baby, and kind of caused, as you know, a downward spiral in her life.
So
But
Egypt banned her movies.
yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah, I mean,
mean,
it's just this insanity. It's like the Irish not not taking a plane. Like, what do you, okay, so you don't get Marilyn Monroe. Well,
well,
you teach us.
I
Well, you're
mean,
not Marilyn Monroe.
but you mentioned, and then the Irish prime minister gets to fly around in a plane that doesn't have the latest
I know, I know, I know.
safety equipment for landing in fog because
Yeah, I know.
Israel makes it.
Yeah. Yep. So now you get to the third, the trifecta, which chronologically comes with this one, and that is, of course, the very wonderful and also hypnotically captivating Elizabeth Taylor. She converted in 1958. Um, what was interesting, of course, is she did live several years after. Let me just make sure it was 58 when she converted, or maybe it might have been 59. Of course, she got in a lot of trouble because of her people did not like the fact that she had broken up the marriage of uh with
Eddie
this
Fisher
man.
and Debbie
Yeah,
Reynolds.
yeah. So Eddie Fisher's left his wife, and and yeah, she was considered a home wrecker after that. They weren't married for that long, but she did not convert because of Eddie Fisher. She converted because of this guy, Mike Todd. She loved Mike Todd, and she that according to her, that was the real love of her life. Let me just make sure I have her date right of her conversion. She converted in 59. 59.
I forgot,
Uh
had Todd died in a crash?
yeah, plane crash. And it says, although two of her husbands, Mike Todd and Eddie Fisher, were Jewish, Taylor said she did not convert because of them and had wanted to do so for a long time. There was comfort and dignity and hope for me in this ancient religion that has survived for 4,000 years. I feel as if I've been a Jew all my life. Walker believed that Taylor was influenced in her decision by her godfather, Victor Cazalet, and her mother, who were active supporters of Zionism during her childhood. So, as we know, she became very active in raising money for Israel. My dad took her to Israel in 1980s again. Um, they got in a car accident out in the middle of the desert, and they were both okay. She had a neck brace around her neck, and my dad had his eye cut. It was a bad accident, but but they were okay. Um, but she was supportive of Israel throughout her life, and um, even after she was, as you can see, married quite a few more times after. Do we want to talk about marriages, Philip, being good for business? Look at this one. This one is wow. Two times just to Richard Burton. Yeah. And so she was married quite a few times. Uh, yeah. If you consider the two marriages to Richard Burton, two different marriages, which, you know, they did get married a second time. Uh, yeah, it's nine. So she was also, when she went to Israel with my father, she was living with, and there were other men that were in her life. She was with a Mexican billionaire at the time, Victor Luna, who was her boyfriend, companion at the time. So there were other people too. That was like about in between John Warner and Larry Fortensky. And remember, John Warner was a U.S. senator, so she was
Hmm.
also this dude for a while. Um, and so yeah, she had an amazing life. Lots of lots of challenges too. My dad told me, and it's not confidential because people know this about her story. My dad said he had never seen somebody take more pills than, you know, in his life. She was constantly on
Rabbi,
taking pills, for pain
I,
and for getting through, her day. Yeah.
I was living in Washington, D.C. when she was married to Senator Warner, and they were like, back then, it was unique. And they were the Hollywood couple, you know,
Yeah.
and everywhere they went, it was, paparazzi, camera crews. Because back then, that was very unusual uh, for a politician to be married
To a
to
Hollywood.
any. Yeah, oh yeah.
So today, you know, that was those were unbelievable, right? Those converts, because people were like, "What's going on here? Our biggest stars are all becoming Jew." I mean, not all of them, but like two of the most beautiful women of the '50s both converted to Judaism, and you know, it kind of reflects as we looked at when we were looking at the music. I mean, during that time, you have Harry Belafonte and Nina Simone singing songs from Israel. It's a very different landscape than what we live with today, no doubt. But what's interesting is we still have um, people converting to Judaism, and I would say in Hollywood, and I would say that yeah, they're not the level of a Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor, but I make the argument who is. We don't have stars like that anymore. We have a whole different. There's a whole different situation today. There's very few people that we can say are like of that magnitude, especially women that have that kind of that kind. I mean, there are a few, but even the ones we would say like a Zendaya or a Zoe Saldana or some one of those women who's just in everything, you'd still say they're not like these people who everyone wanted to know about and everyone wanted to see pictures of them. Um, it was a different time. And there was a certain you know, there was a certain elegance and a certain, kind of level of celebrity that we just don't have that anymore. But we still have people who have converted and in recent days. And again, are they as famous? No. And interestingly, by the way, many of them are still women. And a lot of them are converting, of course, like an Aaron Foster, when they marry somebody who is Jewish, but it's continuing to this day. So, for example, Isla Fisher, when she married Sacha Baron Cohen, she converted to Judaism. Zoe Deschanel, when she married her husband, she converted about 10 years ago. Um, uh, Elizabeth Banks, who is in a lot of stuff. Elizabeth Banks, from what I understand, has never gone through the conversion, but I just saw her post a video not long ago where she's talking about being Jewish. So she said she never went through the formal mikvah, but considers herself Jewish and went through the classes. So I don't know. But she's another person who has definitely talked about about being part of the Jewish community, and I think she's been very very she's a I think she's a pretty articulate, creative um well, maybe we can finish, maybe we can show one video because um maybe I can show this because this was just from last week. And this is I'm going to try. I'm going to try. And again, not to say I want to give a Hollywood star, again, kind of, I think has gone through, at least considers herself part of it. You listen to her message, and hopefully if you can't see it, hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Okay, here we go.
I was fortunate enough to go to a bat mitzvah tonight in my community. I'm already in my pajamas because I got home and it was just one of those dresses that just needed to get off as fast as I got in the door, and the shoes too. So I'm already in my pajamas. But I was really inspired again by this beautiful ceremony where a young person, 13 years old, contemplated the big questions that we're all contemplating right now. And there's always a silent meditation in the Shabbat service, a time for reflection, and they often include a reading. And this is the reading that was included this week. I thought I would share it with all of you because I found it to be, again, very clarifying. We're all looking for advice on how to be living right now, and I thought that this was really good advice. So here it is. Live each day to the fullest. Get the most from each hour, each day, and each age of your life. Then you can look forward with confidence and back without regrets. Be yourself. Be your best self. Dare to be different and to follow your own star. And don't be afraid to be happy. Enjoy what is beautiful. Love with all your heart and soul. Believe that those you love you. Forget what you have done for your friends and remember what they have done for you. Disregard what the world owes you and concentrate on what you owe the world. When you are faced with a decision, make that decision as wisely as possible, then forget it. The moment of absolute certainty never arrives.
Is anybody hearing this?
Yes.
Blessed is the generation in which the old listen to the young, and doubly blessed is the generation in which the young listen to the old.
So did you hear it? Did you hear
Yeah,
it?
that was really
Yes.
compelling. That was
Saw it, I
amazing.
didn't hear it.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
too
That's
bad.
terrific.
Did it play or did you just hear it?
It played.
But
It
it
played.
played.
It
I didn't hear it.
I don't
So
understand.
Just me, maybe just me.
yeah, I guess I guess Bob, everybody else are. Anyways, that's one
Well,
of the reasons why I haven't been
good.
why I didn't show a lot of videos over the last, because I don't want people to just be sitting there. But you think about somebody like Elizabeth Banks, who is big, does a lot of comedies, but has been in a lot of stuff. I mean, she's also been in all the Hunger Games movies, and she's a pretty big celebrity who you could say she's not. I'm not comparing her to Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor. Didn't say that. But I'm telling you that for actors and actresses today who are successful, and for them to be sharing things that they heard and are part of in a Shabbat service, to me, that's a whole nother level. I not that I would have ever expected Elizabeth Taylor, whether or not she, would have shared what she heard in a recent service. That's amazing when you think about it. On the face of it, it's just another person. It's just somebody sharing something on Facebook. But when I see somebody who people recognize, you know, speaking some beautiful truths and sharing wisdom from the Jewish people, I that means something to me. And I think we hear so much about the negativity or whatever the latest star or musician who said something, dirted Israel, for no reason. They had there was no necessary connection to anything that they did. When you see that kind of thing, you recognize that you can't just say, well, we live in a really, really bad time. Okay, there's definitely some challenges. I'm not negating that. I'm not naive. But I also want to tell you that we live in a time when somebody does that, and she just did it. I mean, I don't think she thought she was making a profound statement, and maybe it's not a profound statement, but to me, it's profound in that she shared it, and that that's everybody who watched that sees that this is a message from a bat mitzvah. So, and she says it's her community. So again, I'm not saying it's the same as Marilyn Monroe. I'm not saying that, but I'm telling you that the level of how people who have made this decision in Hollywood to become Jewish and to embrace this is to me one of the greatest opportunities. And I'm hoping that the next season of Nobody Wants This will be kind of what I'm expecting it to be, which is going to have some very exciting things about conversion to Judaism and what is happening and what can happen here. Because you can say what you want about the hatred, and again, I'm not saying ignore it, don't ignore it, but also recognize what's happening when you have thousands of people embracing Judaism in Hollywood, in the highest levels of Hollywood, who are doing it in a very public way.
Regarding
Understand. I just want to say understand that what is happening now, as I told you, my future son-in-law going through conversion class a year and a half ago. In his class, there were so many students that they had to split the class into two because there were too many students. I just recommended somebody else to the same program, to the MOS program up at AJU. The class was full. It's been like that for 4 years. It started even before October 7th, but it hasn't stopped. It's accelerated since October 7th. So there are people, in spite of all of this, and again, as some of you know, my future son-in-law Jack spent his first few months after his first 6 months of converting. He ended up spending 3 days in a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv. Welcome to the Jewish people. That this is he said he's never felt more proud and more certain of his decision to join the Jewish people. And again, I know there's a lot of people right now. We don't have a lot of people today, but almost everybody here knows somebody who's converted to Judaism and who's become a wonderful addition to our community. But when it happens in Hollywood, it has a profound effect. It has an effect on people. When Elizabeth Taylor converted to Judaism, there were other people who started thinking about doing that because of her. I don't know what to say other than that's what happens. So sorry. Yeah, Bob.
Well, I was going to say, was it really notorious when Quincy Jones, did he convert publicly?
Interestingly, interestingly, Quincy Jones did not convert. Now it's well known that his wives, actually a couple of his wives were Jewish. All right, well, definitely one of them, Peggy Lipton, who's the mother of Rashida Jones. So Rashida Jones is Jewish, and you know, uh, but
He's buried at Hillside.
so was Quincy buried at Hillside?
Yeah, he is. And Peggy Lipton is about 50 yards away, but different areas.
So he never went through a conversion, but he's another person who, like, kind of because of his family, really lived amongst the Jews. And there's Hetty's watching from Florida. Excellent, Hetty. So it's late there, so thanks, Hetty. But we have so many people who are like that. And again, when a celebrity does it, again, you have people like, we have Rod Carew, who never formally converted to Judaism, but you know practices Judaism, raised his kids Jewish. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll look, I don't know I don't know what people's what their what their plans are for burial. Thank God, Rod Crew's 81 years old. He should live and be 120. But yeah, there are people who are buried at both Hillside and Mount Sinai and Eden who never went through conversion, but who always consider themselves part of the Jewish community. Another African American, very successful African American, who was definitely married to two Jewish women, was Richard Pryor, and his daughters have been outspoken. One of them, Rain, I've talked to many times. She's a wonderful talent and writer in her own right. And we've actually talked about her doing a program on the network for on the African American, for Jewish African American point of view, the experience of what that means. But he has two wives, children from two marriages. Richard Pryor does, where the kids were raised, two daughters who were raised Jewish, but by separate mothers. So yeah, I mean, he's not buried. I know for a fact he's not buried in a Jewish cemetery, um, but yeah, there are several people who have. So I didn't know he was actually buried in a Jewish cemetery, but there are several people who are buried at, I know for a fact, at Mount Sinai, who were married to Jewish people and not gone through conversion. By the way, interestingly enough, back to, I'm just tell you before we sign off, Elizabeth Taylor was not buried at Mount Sinai. I only know this because I talked to the people at Mount Sinai who I'm friendly with. She had a plot in Mount Sinai and she ended up being buried at Forest Lawn, which was weird. I said, she was so proud of her Judaism. Why was Elizabeth Taylor not buried at Mount Sinai? And they said, well, there was instructions for her burial that we could not accommodate. Now, it wasn't that she was being buried with someone who's not Jewish, because there's many people there who are not Jewish. So it wasn't a non-Jewish spouse. That was definitely not it. And she had a plot. So it wasn't like she didn't have a plot there, but Mount Sinai would not let her be buried there. And my guess is that I didn't want to push them on it. So I don't know. So I'm not 100% sure on this, but my guess is one of the things I know about Elizabeth Taylor is she was very, very fond of her dogs, loved her pets, loved her dogs. And I have a feeling she wanted to be buried with her dogs or one of her dogs, and Mount Sinai won't allow that. That is against Mount Sinai's rules. So I have a feeling that that's why she's not buried at Mount Sinai. So interestingly enough, she's buried next door at Forest Lawn. And I know she had a Jewish service, but she's not buried in Jewish property. So I'm not positive. Do not quote me on the fact. That's my speculation, but based on the fact that I know that was a big wish of hers, or a big interest of hers, and it could have been her wish, and Mount Sinai would not have accommodated that. So that's a possibility.
Philip's calling TMZ right now. So
Dude, I could see, I would love to get corroboration on this at some point, and I will tell you if I can corroborate this story, but this is the case. And by the way, it's, I find it kind of fascinating when something like that happens. I for all my years in Los Angeles, I have not officiated at many huge celebrities funerals. I've mentioned this before, because I'm in Santa Clarita. I'm not in Los Angeles, but there are funerals occasionally in LA, as we've seen even just like in the last couple of years, where they are there. That there's going to be a lot of celebrities and a lot of people in Hollywood that will be at those ceremonies in at Mount Sinai or Hillside or some of those places. But yes, I'm not. That is not my. That's not my. That's not my work for the most part. I would say very few. Anyways, I don't know how we wound up just on funerals, but or on death, but yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, how how Hollywood is connected to those. And again, Bob, I think you make a good point. When you talked about Hillside prides itself because it's the cemetery of Temple Israel of Hollywood. They actually have a directory. They have a directory of celebrities, which you can get, which has where the celebrities are buried at Hillside, because there are so many of them. And of course, the Al Jolson Memorial is the preeminent monument in the whole place and is something you can see from the freeway. But yeah, we talk about Hollywood. We come back to where we started with Al Jolson and the fact that you can see him from the 405. So thank you everybody for being here tonight, and we covered a lot of ground in Jewish Hollywood without going through every Jewish actor who ever lived, which because that you can do on your own. You can Google up all those people. Hopefully, you learned a little something, or we looked at some aspects of this that we wouldn't have thought about otherwise. And yeah, it was hard not showing clips, especially from Curb and some of these other things that are so Jewish. But yeah, I was worried that they wouldn't work. So next week we're going to move into one last area of media before we wrap up, which is an interesting one, not one that again people talk about that much, but we're going to talk about Jews in the in comic books uh, as what that means as a media, and also Jews in graphic novels, Jews in the comic book industry and graphic novels, because
There
it
we,
is
are you, I'm sorry,
yeah,
we were just at the Skirball. I
Yep.
was just at the Skirball, so they have that comic book exhibit with Superman. As soon as you walk in, it was
Yep.
exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's something that most people aren't aware of, or if they are aware of, they're not fully aware of. So we're going to talk about it next week, and also not just about comic books, but also um, graphic novels, including like this one that I showed up for our Torah study. This is the R. Crumb Book of Genesis, the illustrated Book of Genesis. But he's not Jewish, though his wife Aileen was. But we're going to look at some of the people who really started the graphic novel industry, and we're going to obviously explain how Jews basically invented the comic book, because when we see every major Hollywood
Just
studio,
lost you.
I say every Hollywood studio making movies on comic books, these were characters invented by Jews. All right, everybody, we'll see you soon.
All right.
And,
Sorry all for
Thank you.
arriving late.
Bye,
So
all.
late.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
We're glad you're here. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.